In today's video, I want to start talking about my garden plan for the spring. I may go ahead and do this as two parts because I want to talk first about who my customers would be, because otherwise it's like, well, what are you going to plant? You know, because who are you going to sell it to? And I also wanted to talk about just my general idea of what I want to plant, even in the future, just my thought process behind that. Before I get into the real details about where are my rows going to be and what exactly am I going to plant in each of those rows. You know, I used to run a little organic produce and grocery store, and so I could buy whatever I wanted to at cost. You know, I don't have the store anymore, and so I'm having to think about buying produce. And yeah, retail prices are pretty expensive, especially up in Alaska. But most of all the food that gets to the island comes by barge, and chill shipping, you know, for produce can be pretty expensive. So for example, something like potatoes, which are really cheap, you might actually spend more shipping them because they're so heavy than you would paying for the item itself. If I grow things for myself, I'm essentially saving myself money. So I'm my own customer for some of the things I'll be growing. What I had planned when I did own my store was I would have that would be part-time job, and then I would have a garden, and that would be another part-time job, and then I would sell my own stuff at my own store. So now I don't have the store. It's now called Twisted Root Market, and so that is a potential customer. I did sell some sugar snap peas and some basil last year in the little tiny bit that I did get planted. The only thing is, when you sell to a retailer, you have to drop your price a little bit so that they're able to mark up and make enough money to run their storefront. One of the advantages of selling to a retailer is that they already have a big customer base. They're already open. You don't have to be there selling it. So that's an advantage, and in some ways it can make up for the fact that if you can sell more quantity through that store, then if you make less, you're still doing well. That was my plan, to be kind of my number one customer. So we'll see how that goes. There is a community market in Wrangell, which is once a month. A table is $15 for the couple hours that it's open. And in the past, there have been a lot of people that have showed up, and people in town are super supportive of buying local produce and locally made items. And I was just talking with a friend, Maria Byford, right before I left Wrangell to come down here to Eugene, and we were talking about, there's something in Juneau and Haines, it's called Salt and Soil, I believe, where it's an online thing. You can get online. Local producers put their stuff, you know, what's available online. People can choose what they want, and then there is a 1 day a week pickup at a particular site that the customers will go pick up the stuff. And yeah, again, that's just Haines and Juneau I see listed. And Maria was saying, why don't we have something like that for Wrangell? Now, there aren't a ton of food producers right now. I would be one. Maria has a high tunnel that recently went up, and she's producing some things. Peter Branson does potatoes and leeks and some other things. Terry Pino has been kind of growing some herbs. You know, there's various people doing some different things, and maybe we could pull something together. But pulling something together like that might actually be a little bit of work, and I'm trying to avoid additional work. So I don't know. But that was something she brought up that I thought was interesting to think about as another outlet. So yeah, so those are the potential customers: myself, retail store, community market, and maybe something where growers could get together and direct sell to folks. That is what I'm going to be thinking about when I grow my produce. And so then, just generally talking about the crops that I want to grow, I'm not going to be like everything. I'm not going to be cabbage and broccoli and potatoes and lettuce and celery and that sort of thing. I'm going to be focusing on items that do not ship well to Alaska. I mean, they have to sit on the barge for days as they come up when they've already sat in the warehouse in the Northwest or in California and Mexico at different times of the year. You know, things don't ship well, like basil, or a lot of herbs don't ship well, baby greens, lettuces, things like that. I'm looking for items that don't ship well, and then also items that are typically sell for a higher price. So I made a list of things that I may grow this season, a few things, but mostly looking towards what I want to grow eventually. So first of all, greens. I've got listed here kale and chard and lettuce and baby greens, and then some oddballs like collard greens, mustard, endive, maybe even dandelion. Because at the store I could sell a ton of kale, you know, some chard, and then it was just really nice to have some oddball things that you know, a couple people might be interested in getting some mustard greens or things like that. What I'm having a hard time trying to decide is what to do about lettuce and baby greens. Lettuces sell great. I could sell a lot of lettuce heads. Baby greens go for a lot of money, but there's a lot of slug pressure in our area because it's just always so wet, it seems like. And when I had a small garden at Christine Jenkins' place back in 2013 and 2014, the slug pressure was unreal. They would just gobble stuff down. I tried some romaine lettuce and it did okay. But I've got to think about that baby greens. If they're, I mean, wouldn't that be gross? Like slugs all in your baby greens, I don't know. So I have to see. This last season, I didn't have as much slug pressure, and I think it's because at that other garden, and there was lots of grasses, some things that I couldn't control about the border where the slugs just lived. So I think I can control that on my garden, and I think what I'll do is do maybe a trial plot of baby greens, because that would really be, people love that. It does not ship well, it does not last when it gets here, when it gets into Wrangell, Alaska, and so that would be something I want to do. So I think I'm going to try both lettuce and maybe a patch of baby greens. It's just a test to see how that goes. So that's greens. And then I was thinking about culinary herbs, especially basil. Basil, people just, I have a huge market for basil. I could just sell all the basil I could, grow practically, selling it to customers directly. And then also I had Asian restaurant, Michelle's Taste of Asia, who bought a bunch of my basil, and she was just, oh wow, this stuff really lasts amazingly long. I think like to do things like parsley and cilantro. Those are just basics. And then also I've always had some good results with, like, say, selling dill and mint, and watercress even. And then it'd be nice to have like some rosemary, oregano, thyme, tarragon, sage. There's a friend of mine, Terry Pino, I was talking about earlier, who was growing herbs, and so if she's going to kind of do the herb thing, I might just back off that and stick to some things like maybe basil, parsley, and cilantro, but see what she's kind of thinking about. So I'd like to do some of that, because you don't sell huge quantities of some of those herbs, but they're kind of a steady little source of income, have a little patch of them. I've got culinary roots bulbs, fennel, leeks, garlic, burdock, horseradish. It'd be nice to have a little bit of some of those things. I'd like to do some leeks, because leeks grow really well as an onion option in kind of the wetter, colder climate. And but they just sit there in the ground and you're not harvesting them right away. So I don't really want to do leeks probably right away when I have such a small space, but once I have a larger garden, that might be something I can focus on. I don't know that I would do garlic. Garlic would just be maybe a small patch for myself, but I'm not going to do garlic. because again, it just kind of sits in the ground. It is high. It can be really high value actually, but yeah, and then you have to cure it, and that can be challenging if it's wet. If it's wet out. So anyway, that's something I've thought about. Roots, carrots, beets, potatoes, parsnips, baby turnips, radishes. I think that definitely I want to do carrots, beets, radishes for sure. People go freaking crazy for fresh, good carrots. Like, oh my God. So the other thing I have to think about is some of these things I would really need a seeder for, because manually seeding like carrots, seeded directly, yeah, so I would have to invest in like a seeder. So I'm gonna have to think about that too, but I'll probably try a patch of carrots, maybe cylinder beets, and radishes. And then people don't really know about baby turnips. I've just started educating people at the store about baby turnips. So I may not start with that, but those are high value, and it might be something that I would do. And then it'd be nice to have some just kind of, again, some odd roots, like a few parsnips and some things like that as like a little bit of an option. And potatoes, I wouldn't typically tell anybody to grow potatoes unless they were like fingerling potatoes. But Peter Branson, he's kind of got the, he's been doing fingerling potatoes. And so I would probably just grow like a large storage potato for myself and not get into the potato business. Miscellaneous vegetables and fruits: snap peas, green beans, blackberry, raspberry, blueberry, rhubarb, celery, sunflowers. Snap peas are high value. They grow like really well in Wrangell, and so I'm gonna continue. I did those last year. They grow amazing in the crappiest soil ever. That would be great to sell snap peas. Green beans, I don't quite know why I put that down. I'd love to have them. They're high value, but they hate the wet, cold stuff, and so they'd have to be covered, and I may not even try that. Blackberry, raspberry, blueberry, I want to have a berry patch. It's interesting. I worked at the food co-op in the produce department in Port Townsend, Washington, years ago for a number of years, and what I noticed is that people there would not buy blackberries. I mean, they sold so slowly, because even if the blackberries in Oregon or Washington were not in production at the time, people were like, why would I buy a pack of blackberries? They grow everywhere. Even if they're not growing at the time, they just grow everywhere. But then we would sell, blueberries and raspberries and strawberries. So what I found in Wrangell is, because blueberries grow everywhere in Alaska, people are like, why would I buy a pack of blueberries? Geez, they grow everywhere, I did notice in the last few years at the store that people were buying blueberries more often. The fact is that the blueberries, the cultivated blueberries, are way sweeter than the wild blueberries. So people did kind of start buying them a little bit more, I noticed, but boy, they go crazy for blackberries. So boy, it'd be nice to have some blackberries. I want to do raspberries and blueberries for myself, but also to sell. So berry options. Rhubarb grows everywhere and so well in Wrangell. A lot of people have a patch. You can't hardly sell the stuff. Dave Rack, he's a fellow that would sell eggs to me at the store, and I would retail them. He's one of the fellows that brought in eggs, and he had a big, huge rhubarb patch. And one year I tried to sell the rhubarb, we could not sell it. Couldn't for even a low price. And so he would just bring it in, and I'd give it away for free, and it was really awesome. He also would give it to a restaurant so that they could make pies and stuff. I noticed that I could sell some rhubarb at the community market, so I'm probably gonna have a rhubarb patch, maybe just for myself, and also to have a little bit on hand. I want to grow celery for myself. I don't know if it's something that I want to have sitting in my garden. You can actually, with celery, not just cut it off the butt. You can kind of cut it, the outer stalks, and maybe I could bunch those, and maybe, so it might be a vegetable that I would consider growing in the future, but I don't know. But I use celery for myself. I might grow a little patch. And then sunflowers. I wanted a seed that could grow, you know, like I'm not going to grow pumpkins for pumpkin seeds. I'm not going to have a pumpkin patch. You know, you think of all the other seeds that are out there, but I could probably grow sunflowers and get sunflower seeds. We grew them when I was a kid and when I lived in Oregon growing up. And I don't know, I might almost have to grow them in a greenhouse though, but that would be kind of fun just to try. We'll see. And then in the greenhouse, definitely want to do basil. That's one that grows so well inside a greenhouse, and I know I have a market for it. Cherry tomatoes, if unless we have a crappy year, some summers in Wrangell, oh my God, I've worn my winter hat sometimes because it's just been like what in the 50s and stuff. But other years we have these really great summers, and well, when I say great summers, it's like, you know, oh, mid 60s, 70s, low 70s, you know, and it gets like 120 degrees in the greenhouse, and I could grow anything. Yeah, so then I was thinking about the mini cucumbers with the really thin skins because the fruits are small, and people just go crazy for those mini cucumbers. They're high value items, and they don't ship well. They get kind of, they rot so quickly, they get kind of gooey on the outside, and so I kind of be interested in trying that as something in the greenhouse. And then I was talking with Michelle, who has the restaurant Taste of Asia. She was saying she'd be interested in basil, mint, green onions, and Thai hot peppers. So in the greenhouses, I may try some hot peppers. I did in the past have a little greenhouse out at Christine Jenkins' place. I was growing peppers for someone else, and they did fine. They did well, and I might try that. And I'd like to get maybe the specific variety that Michelle's interested in for having for her restaurant. And so then again, yeah, mint, I plan on growing. I'm gonna have to do a container because that stuff is so invasive. And then green onions, which I've never tried. I mean, chives grow really great, but people always say, oh, onions don't grow well here. But I don't know, leeks grow great. So I'm gonna try a patch of green onions to see how they do, because I would love to have green onions for her restaurant. And then I wrote down medicinal plants. It'd be nice to have things like, you know, a little bit of things like catnip, calendula, lemon balm, some other things that I use. But I probably will focus on that a little bit later on. The other challenge for me growing things back to the greenhouse is that I don't have a nursery. If you want to grow tomatoes and peppers and things like that, you really want to get started early. So what the plan is, a little bit longer term, is to build a nursery right off our house where the sun comes up in the spring and it gets pretty nice sun, and then we can also, you know, keep it warm directly in the earlier months, and then I could start, you know, some peppers and some tomatoes and maybe mini cucumbers or something like that before I get them out to an outside greenhouse. So yes, that's something thinking about long term. But those are the things that I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about what do I want to plant this year in my smaller garden is, you know, who are my customers going to be, and you know, generally kind of what am I kind of trying to grow, and that would be the customers would be myself, retail store, community market, and maybe some direct sales along with other farmers. And then my focus for crops is things that don't ship well to Alaska, and things that are high value. And but also, you know, if I'm my own customer, then, you know, some things I'll grow like that aren't high value, like potatoes and celery and things like that. Next week I will have my little graph paper out and my rows lined up, and talk specifically about what exactly I want to plant in those beds. And I will see you then.